As you're aware, we are televised. Please be aware it's live streamed, and if you have any objections or anything, just please let me know. Otherwise, it's for everyone to see. For the benefit of everybody here, any new members, but also visitors and anybody watching, we can do introductions. I'm Shail Shah. I'm independent chair of this committee. And to my left,
I'm Councillor Cecile Wright, and I'm the Vice Chair of the committee.
Richard Williams, Executive Director of Resources at EMCCA and Section 73 Officer.
I'm Mick Wash. I'm Director of Finance at EMCCA and Deputy Section 73 Officer.
Where shall we go?
Michael Edley, Senior Governance Officer.
Martin Shipley, Central Midland Audit Partnership Audit Manager.
Susanna Lease, Central Midlands Audit Partnership Group Auditor.
Emma Powley, Head of Government.
Catherine Stevens, Head of Law, Interim.
Mark Surridge, External Audit Partner at Forvis Mazars.
Councillor Craig Whitby, Deputy Mayor Mansfield District Council, substituting for Mayor Andy Abrams.
Michael Edwards, Councillor, Nottingham City Council.
Councillor Nayat Patel, Chair of Audit and Governance, Nottingham City Council.
Councillor Wendy Lukacs, Vice Chair of Governance and Ethics, currently standing in for Councillor Jim Vernon.
Councillor Sam Smith, Leader of the Opposition at Nottinghamshire County Council.
Councillor Mark Cliff, Derbyshire County Council.
Morning, Councillor Kieran Morgan McGeehan, Chair of Audit and Governance at Derby City Council.
Hello everybody, Lewis Whitbread, Councillor for Asland and Rother, work for DCC, and I'm the Chair of Governance, Ethics and Standards over at Derbyshire. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, welcome all, and thank you. And welcome, Councillor Staton. That's fine. Apologies for absence. We've had apologies from Councillor Abraham. Anybody?
And Councillor Payne, who's substituted by Councillor Lukacs.
Sure. Thank you.
Vernon, sorry, Councillor Vernon. Sorry, apologies.
Any declaration of interest from any members? No? Thank you. Members of the public have been invited to participate, but we've not had any questions in advance of the meeting. So if we move on to the first item, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. They've been circulated. Any comments or observations on them? No? Okay. Thank you. So we now move on to the substantive items, and we've been asked to take the external audit item first. So, Mark, over to you.
Yes, and again, thank you for allowing me to go first for logistical purposes. The external audit work and progress report you have in front of you is split in two ways. As the committee might recall, there is a requirement to produce a set of 23-24 financial statements covering a one-month period. They're currently in the public inspection phase at the moment, which ends on the 17th of December, following which we, if we can do it before Christmas, we will, but it is a little bit tight. We'll be issuing our conclusion on those accounts, which will be a disclaimer opinion saying that we haven't completed the work because of the backstop date. We'd like to do that before Christmas, but it could be a bit tight, but it could be in January. What that means is that allows us to get through that process quite quickly and easily, and then focus, as we have been doing, on the 24-25 financial statements, where we've been auditing the opening balances in full to allow us to get to a completed position. That work is progressing nicely, and your next committee meeting in January will have the audit completion report. So shortly after that date, we'll be looking to issue the opinion on that. There are a number of adjustments going through the financial statements, so the financial statements will come back to you as well. What I'd say about that, we'll give you the detail on it, but essentially a lot of that is about this being a new organisation facing new accounting concepts for the first time, and possibly in some cases for the first time in local government. So there's been some complexities to work through, but we're looking in a good position for that. That's the financial statements. The second half goes into the value for money arrangements. Again, I always repeat, we don't provide an opinion on value for money. We provide an opinion on three aspects of financial sustainability, governance, and economy efficiency and effectiveness. Under the Code of Audit Practice, where we identify an area that we are going to look at in more detail, we call them a risk of significant weakness in arrangements, and we bring that to you as a committee. Covering the years that we were auditing, we've identified two areas that we wanted to delve further into. The first is the 23-24 accounts being published after the backstop date. And the second is just understanding governance of performance monitoring arrangements in a new organisation. We wanted to make sure we poked to that a little bit further. You've got our work performed conclusions reached on, I'm going to say page 29 of the pack. I'm not sure if you're working on that one. Missing the statutory financial reporting deadline, we know that there's been a number of conversations with MHCLG that were trying to resolve this before it became an issue for reporting purposes, but within the governance framework, within the statutory instrument and the code that we work to, it is a matter that we will report that the authority did miss that, but obviously it's been fully rectified and remedied, and there's no recommendation to move on that. So it's a fact, it's happened, but now we're talking about 24-25, and we've moved on from that. The other risk of significant weakness was around the performance monitoring and just understanding how that works in the current financial year. We completely understand that the majority of 24-25, the authority was, for want of a better word, passporting grants through to other bodies and only really setting up and gearing up an audit code that says we'd expect performance monitoring to happen from the beginning, but actually you've got nothing to performance monitor. So that was a little complex workaround that we've done. We recognise that the steps have been taken to develop the performance monitoring framework with the new plans going forwards. We have to take this conclusion back through our consistency panel, which is why I haven't nailed down a conclusion on that. That panel is happening next week. So I just need to go through that process, but I think you've got enough context in here of what our indicative direction of travel is on that one. And obviously further details of all of this will be wrapped up in the audit completion report that you'll get in January. So you get a lot more detail and context and firm conclusions at that point. There we go. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Any comments or questions for Mark? Thank you. Move on. And thank you, Mark. So we move back to the item 6 that was on the agenda, the Treasury Management Mid-Year Report. Richard?
Yeah, so if I introduce this item, there's two items, two pieces of paper comprising this report. There's a short cover report and then the main report. There's a lot of economic context and financial context data within the report. Just wanted to highlight then a couple of things, and in the cover report I do point members to section 8, which is the section 8 in the appendix, which is the investment performance, because this is a mid-year performance report, so the performance of our treasury management activity for the first 6 months of the financial year, that is until the end of September. Members will recall that in July we approved a treasury management strategy that enabled the authority to extend what is called our counterparty list. So these are the organisations in which we invest. So this mid-year report starts to reflect that diversification of our investment portfolio. I should stress it is not a long-term investment portfolio. This is mainly dealing with short-term, up to a year of investments, mainly of our cash balances. At the average of the half year, we had about 150 million on the average on deposit, and our interest receipts for the half year are 3.45 million. The extension of our counterparty list is designed to obviously protect our principal, but also to maximise return. We are advised in that regard by MUFG, who are our treasury management advisors. As at the end of September, and this isn't in the report, but this is just some additional information, we had 75 million in money market funds, 40 million in the debt management office. This is the government office that manages the overall national debt, and so that's a fairly safe place, and 55 million on deposit with other local authorities and spread across six local authorities. So that's on the investment side, and I can also confirm to the committee that we undertook no borrowings in that half year.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions or comments for Richard or on the Treasury Management Report? It is a mid-year update, and it wasn't that long before we had the first report outlining the strategy. Councillor Edwards and Councillor Patel.
Well, I feel like I perhaps should have said something at a previous meeting, because I've been struck at just how many of the government's financial decisions to spend have been things that I think probably help industries in Derby quite a bit. And I wondered, had we got any dimension in what we're doing with these monies that sees us investing in or keeping the money in stocks that support the local industries or the local businesses?
So no, that means, so clearly we can have a look at that in terms of our treasury management strategy as we evolve that strategy, and particularly where we may have longer term monies to deposit, but this is very much around short term, so we're very much using diversified money market funds, as I say, other local authorities, rather than a longer term investment. There are two things that I would highlight, though, Councillor Edwards, is that the EMCCA board, at its, I think, last meeting, the meeting before, approved a 2 million investment in Midlands Mineforge, which is an investment fund specifically to invest in university and technology spin-outs. That investment was made alongside the West Midlands and the universities across the West and East Midlands into Midlands Mineforge, and that's specifically around making those investments into those companies to support local companies. And as I say, we've put 2 million in, and part of the rationale for us making that investment is that will leverage a whole bunch of private sector funds, British Business Bank and so on and so forth are all involved in that investment fund. The second thing, and this is, I can't claim credit for this one because this is inherited from the former LEP. They had an angel investment fund which we have inherited, and we still have funds available within that investment fund to invest in local businesses. But no, the treasury management is more about our cash balances rather than those longer term investments.
So I think, Chair, you've said it better than, Richard, you've said it better than I was trying to say. It seems that you're actually mindful of the opportunities and that you're taking those opportunities where you can, which I think is really what I would like to have asked. So thank you for the answer.
Councillor Patel.
Just a couple of questions. So, are you considering environment, social, and governance factors? Are they taken into consideration in terms of when you are taking decisions for investments? I'd also like to know that what proportion of investments are short term, and are there any clear limits on the short term borrowing, and how often are they reviewed?
So I've Can I do that in reverse? So in the Treasury Management Strategy, we have a short-term borrowing limit of 10 million. I mean, that would only be exercised if we fell into overdraft, and we've got a very careful cash flow forecasting, so we make sure that we've got plenty of cash available for known cash outs, but also plenty of money over and above what I just outlined in call accounts and so on, that's immediately liquid to us. And of course, investing in money market funds does mean, again, you've got quite high levels of liquidity. Where you're lending to local authorities, that tends to be on a fixed term basis. But we give the assurance that we're not going to ever drift into a position where we'd need to take some short term borrowings ourselves. But we have that cushion, if you like, of 10 million if we needed that. In terms of the ethical, environmental. So we're working with Treasury Management advisors, particularly on our money market fund investments. They are acutely aware, as our advisors, that all authorities work in a context of, wanting to maximise return, of course, but also to take into account social and ethical factors. And it's them that advise us which money market funds to invest in. So the answer to your question is yes, that is taken into account. And I've forgotten what the middle bit is, Councillor Patel.
What proportion of investments are short term?
Most are short term. So when by short term, I would say up to 12 months. Most, if not all, are short term. So what we've done, just to elaborate a little bit, what we've done since we approved the revised Treasury Management Strategy and that extended is we've taken a view, because what we'd had is typically most of our cash balances before July, when you approved the new Treasury Management Strategy, were on a monthly rolling basis with the Debt Management Office, and that continues to be the case with, as I said, 40 million. Where we've diversified into local authorities, for example, they are at periods of 3, 6 and 12 months.
Any other questions? Yeah. Thank you, Richard. So, recommendation we asked to is note the mid-year performance report. Can we do that? Thank you. So, moving on to item 8, which is the internal audit update. Martin, do you want to?
Thank you, Chair. Right, this is becoming the pretty much standard report which I bring to the committee now, obviously developing as time moves on and as further audits are now undertaken. If we start off on the dashboard, which is page 35 on your papers, you can see from the chart on the top left there, the plan progress chart, about 58% of audits are now either complete or in progress. So we have made a good start to the plan for this year. There's 10% which are ready to commence. They're audits which have been allocated to auditors and have either been scoped or in the process of being scoping. What I will say is there's presently quite a large proportion, 33%, which are waiting to be allocated. They're going to be Q4 audits which are going to be allocated at that point. The reason we've waited until Q4 is this committee were quite specific. They wanted us to undertake audits as opposed to consultancy pieces of work where that was possible. And so obviously there was recommendations potentially coming out of that for improvement. What I will say is we have hung on till Q4. EMCCA is still very much a developing, evolving organisation. So where we can conduct actual audits, where systems, procedures and processes have developed sufficiently, we will do, but it may be that some of those audits do revert back to being consultancy pieces of work, which we work with the organisation for, make suggestions for any improvements should we spot any, and that's taken on board accordingly. Moving across to the middle chart, jobs completed in period, there's 4 completed jobs which I'm reporting to this committee. 2 of them are consultancy pieces of work and 1 of them is a probity piece of work. They're the ones where the control assurance ratings are not applicable on the right. The one audit which is reported is a risk management audit, which I shall come on to in a few moments. If I just jump straight away to the 2 charts below that, the recommendations movement and recommendations open. There's now 6 recommendations shown in each of those charts. They're the recommendations which have come from that risk management audit. And as time moves on, as more audits are completed and more recommendations are made, you'll notice that the recommendations movement and opens chart will develop a lot further, and we'll obviously give information about how recommendations are progressing and what's been made. As will the one on the right of them, the recommendations overdue. That shows where recommendations have reached their expected action date and obviously passed it, in which case if there's anything which is moderate or significant recommendations, we'll bring them to this committee in their entirety for this committee's attention. The chart on the top right, the customer satisfaction, we've had one of those back on the audits that we've completed so far since we've been at EMCCA, and I'm pleased to say we've got 100% good rating. Moving over to the next page, page 36, this gives a breakdown of all of the audits which we've got against the 25-26 audit plan and the brought forward. You can see the majority of the brought forward audits have now been completed or well on the way. The exception to that is the programme project management one. If the committee recalls, we were looking to take that out of the 25-26 plan and move that into next year's because the projects are only just starting to commence and move forward. The committee were quite keen that we actually did look at it this year and did some work. So again, that one's been pushed back to Q4 to be picked up along with the others. And if you look up at the top chart, all I'll draw your attention to is the big chunk of not allocated, about 2/3 of the way down there. They're the Q4 jobs that I'm referring to, which we are due to probably scope December time and commence early in the new calendar year. There are quite a few there, and it may be that some of those roll into the new financial year before they're actually fully completed. If I just make the committee aware of that now, because we're late starting them in the year, they very well may be brought forward jobs at the end. One of the jobs there, the Adult Skills Fund job, the 25-26, I have been talking to the Section 73 officer, Richard, about that, and we are potentially looking to slip that into the 26-27 audit plan. Main reason being, we've only recently completed the Adult Skills Fund audit from the brought forward, and there has also been a probity piece of work within that area. So I've got sufficient knowledge and understanding of that particular section in order to feed into the annual audit opinion when I get there, and it would make a lot more sense to actually do the Adult Skills Fund audit in the following year so we can keep ongoing progress there. Over the page, there's a breakdown of the risk management framework audit which was undertaken. You can see there that it obtained reasonable assurance overall. We evaluated 10 control areas, 2 were adequate and 8 were partial. The control objectives laid out there for you on the left-hand side. From that audit, moving on over the page, there were 6 recommendations, 3 were low risk, 3 were moderate risk. I won't go into them in any detail at this stage because there is a report later in the agenda which covers risk management, and I believe it picks up all of those matters there. The financial management audit below that was a consultancy piece of work. We were looking to provide assurance on the financial management arrangements in place at EMCCA, and obviously any challenges of being a newly formed county combined authority. We did that from comparison of the authority's systems and procedures against local government association, best practice and guide on financial management in combined authorities. And we also undertook a review of the 24-25 key control account reconciliations at year end to ensure we could provide assurance on that. I think through that consultancy piece of work there was two suggestions which we made for management, of which both have been taken on board, and I believe management are putting systems in place to tighten up controls there. Adult Skills Fund, which is on page 41 of your pack, that's where we undertook a review to identify the preparedness of the authority for the allocation of management of the Adult Skills Fund. We did this by benchmarking the controls and procedures and systems in place against the DFE guidance and requirements and best practice, and that one provided positive assurance throughout. We looked at all of the areas on the left-hand side underneath the potential risks, and no issues were raised throughout the entirety of this initial review, which is again why I think it's worthwhile slipping that other audit into 26-27 when we can drill down and do some specific looking sort of under the surface of that. And then the final audit, which I'm presenting to the committee today, is we did a review of a skills bootcamp provider. This was a specifically requested piece of work by the authority. It was a probity review, which we were asked to look at one of the skills bootcamp providers and validate the evidence that they had for chargeable milestones. On undertaking this work, we identified issues with evidence retention, student addresses falling outside of the EMCCA boundaries, the use of erroneous national insurance numbers by claimants, and potential invalid citizenship declarations. The result of that was there was sufficient evidence to repudiate any financial claims from this provider, and payments were subsequently withheld. So they were not paid for those particular candidates. And then over the page, again on page 44 in your papers, this is a section which, as more audits are completed and as it gets beefed up a bit more, will give you a lot more information as to how we're going forward. But at the moment, that's got the 6 risk management recommendations in there, which are all future actions. We will follow them up at the point of when they've reached their expected implementation date, but we obviously leave them with management until that point. And then there will be a section following that highlighted recommendations where any have passed those original implementation dates and not been actioned or implemented.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
Councillor Stein.
Left microphone, the microphone.
Right.
Okay, thank you. I'm just looking at page 38 on risk management. Can I ask what documents you actually looked at, how those documents relate to what we've got in our papers for the risk management update? That's the first question. And did you just look at, you looked at documents, you didn't, because we're early days, you didn't have, did you have the opportunity to look at how these were actually being used in practice?
With respect to that review, to answer your question, surely, yes, we looked at everything in its entirety. Within CMAP, we've got a former risk management manager that used to manage the service in practice, and we had engaged him on this audit to actually have a look through the protocols in place, the risk management framework, and within that he did also look at the ongoing risk registers and how it was being developed and how they were being utilised throughout the organisation. This is actually the second piece of work we've done on risk management since we've been auditing EMCCA. The first piece of work was a sort of light touch, looking at the systems, procedures and protocols. This one's drilled down that little bit further, which is why we've been able to make a few more recommendations this time, where we've actually identified where certain things, why they looked probably absolutely fine in premise when we did the initial review, but when you look at them in reality of how it's panning out and how things are moving forward, how it's operating, there were potential weaknesses in control which could have been tightened up on.
In the material we've been given on risk management update, have any of these points that you've assessed as a weakness, have they been addressed, or are they still to be addressed?
They are in the process of being addressed. If you actually have a look at the top of page 38, it identifies what the weaknesses are there, what the rating is, and then where it says original action date, that's the time frame which has been given to us by management for when they will actually have these issues addressed. At the point of when they actually reach those expected implementation dates, that's when we do an active follow-up to actually see have these been implemented or not, and what will feed into that latter section in the report in due course.
Okay, so it's not there yet?
No, it's still ongoing.
If I recall correctly, it's March, wasn't it, the target date for those recommendations?
3 of them are March and 3 of them are December 25. So, thank you.
Councillor Edwards?
Can I just sort of check your confidence in what you're saying by going to page 41, Adult Skills Fund. So you've done a bit of work on 4 particular potential risks. You've said on mitigating actions not applicable, but then you've said on assurance rating not applicable. Why haven't you made a judgment on how assured you are in the work that's been done?
When we do consultancy pieces of work, we work with management and officers to basically review all the systems procedures. Rather than making formal recommendations in a consultancy piece of work, we make suggestions. So it's suggestions for improvement which management may or may not take on board, which will then potentially do an audit 12-18 months down the line to see how things are operating, because they may not have took that particular suggestion on board, but they may have done something different which still addresses that. Where it's a formal audit where we're looking to make actual recommendations, we have a specific risk recommendation matrix which we score them against. So we score the severity of the risk, the likeliness of the actions occurring and the risk materialising. That then feeds into a bigger picture where we then score the overall audit against it, and then that feeds into another section where we provide slight adjustments if required from the auditor's opinion, which provide an overall assurance rating. On a consultancy piece of work, we're working with management and with officers in order to try and improve their systems prior to any audit taking place. It's what we tend to do if a system is just evolving and just being developed. With respect to actual auditing to actually provide an assurance rating, you would expect to have sort of 12, 18 months, 2 years worth of data and systems and procedures under the belt and behind them, so you can actually do substantive testing and checks and looking at what the controls, how they're actually being implemented in action in reality. For a consultancy piece of work, it's more against the systems, procedures, protocols to make sure that they've got the correct controls in place, but you don't necessarily do the level of drill down on those to see if they're operating as they should do, which is why consultancy pieces haven't got an assurance rating, but actual audits do have, which is why the committee, I think, asked if we could do actual audits where possible, to obviously provide them with an assurance rating.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Just going back to the risks on page 38, it's good to see that most of the moderate risks are due to be completed within a month, which you'd expect, particularly on the continuity plan that's not in place, etc. So getting that sorted quickly is the right thing to do. Is it normal to have the low risk ones taking 4 months, a quarter? Is that normal? Is that usual? Are you happy with that? Is that what you see as best practice elsewhere as well?
Yeah. With respect to the recommendations, what we say is we obviously make the recommendations to management, and we seek a management response to say what action are you going to take, when will that be implemented by, who's actually going to be doing that. Now, sometimes actions can take, a month, 6 weeks to put in place because they're fairly straightforward. On other occasions, not specific to this one, but on other occasions, for example, where it's a financial audit, it could take 12, 18 months to embed because you need to wait for the year-end accounts, or you need to sort of get the year-end accounts out of the way and move further forward and develop that. Others, it might be about bringing in additional resources and so forth, which then needs to go through due process and can take 12, 18 months. Now, what I would say is, as a rule of thumb, the higher the risk rating on the recommendation, the sooner we would like it to be implemented and addressed to obviously reduce any risk. But it doesn't necessarily follow that the higher the risk, the quicker we would expect to see it addressed. So you often get a sort of bit of a difference with respect to the implementation dates for recommendations, because it needs to be realistic to how long it would take to actually put that control in place to address the risk which we've identified through the audit.
Councillor State.
I just wanted to ask about the skills bootcamp findings. I was interested to hear about some more context, if possible. I mean, what was EMCCA's relationship with this, and what is the learning from this for EMCCA, obviously?
I think if we're probably going into any more depth on that one, it's probably best to do it under closed session, because obviously by the nature of it being a probity piece of work, yes, which I'm happy to do so
If members are happy, we can pick that up right at the, after the end of the public session. We can
just as a thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, this meeting is a public meeting. We've given no notice of exception or exemption, so there would be no closed session in which any decision could be taken. However, Chair, if members want further information, it might be appropriate to provide that either in writing or in a separate informal session on Teams in between now and the next audit meeting.
Okay.
Happy to do whichever.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll try and either do a private meeting, or if Councillor Station and Martin, you can have a chat with each other and then decide what we do after. Thank you. Any further questions on any of the internal audit items from Martin? Councillor Whitbread.
A basic one. I'm happy to see that we're in the green. It's very easy to read. I have to tell you every time, layman over here, but it's in the green. That's wonderful work. But this is a new organisation, and it comes with benefits, fresh slate and everything. It also comes with a lot of drawbacks, and you've got a lot of work to do. Is this a typical position to be in? Because this looks pretty good to me. I say it's green. Is this typical for a new organisation? How are we doing? Are we doing a good job? Are things coming right? Is my question. Thank you.
From the audits and the consultancy piece of work which have been undertaken so far, yes, we're very happy with the way in which the systems are developing and the organisation is progressing and moving forward. Obviously, full assessment of that will be when I give the annual audit opinion on the financial year, which will probably be sort of June or July next year. And it will depend largely on those additional audits for Q4 being obviously undertaken and sufficiently progressed in order for me to feed those into there. But yes, at the moment, I've got no concerns.
So recommendations there, we have asked to consider the progress against the audit plan and the status of the open recommendations and seek any required assurances to ensure that appropriate action is taken. Can we agree with that? Yeah. Thank you. So item 9 is the risk management update. Richard, do you want to introduce it?
So I'm going to split this into two parts. The first part I'll just run through very quickly the report, and then with your agreement committee I'm going to present a couple of slides that relate to the two risks that the committee wanted to do a bit of a deep dive into, and I'll use that as a visual aid just to go through those rather than doing this from the report. So this risk management update is obviously from a management perspective, rather than an internal audit perspective, although we have reflected the fact that Martin and team have given reasonable assurance on our progress. Now, we're not standing on our laurels there because, you know, Martin and team have identified some further progress that needs to be made, and the management actions, we're taking those very, very seriously. We have just hired a dedicated performance and risk management manager who will lead a very small team but skilled team in managing both corporate performance and risk, and that's set out in the report. We've also had EMCCA board at in the summer signed off the risk management framework that you had previously signed, and that will be the basis upon which we manage risk and the initial risk register as well. The committee asked in March to do a deep dive on two risks, one of which was the risk that our funding would be eroded by inflation, and the second one was that whether we would be able to create a single unified culture for the organisation. I'm going to come to those when I present the slides in a moment. The final part of the report and the supporting annex is for the committee's information and comment are the main financial risks that we've taken into account in preparing the authority's draft budget. The draft budget for the authority for 26-27 and the medium-term financial plan to 2031 will be published tonight. But I thought it would be helpful for the committee to see the sort of financial risks I, as Section 73 officer, took into account in setting that budget, which will then be considered by EMCCA board a week on Monday. I'll pause there. If there's any questions on what I've just said, and then I'll move into just the deep dive on the two risks that you particularly wanted a bit more information on.
I don't know whether this is appropriate. I felt that we didn't really, there are documents relating to risk management which we haven't had, or we haven't got ready access to, that it would be helpful. I mean, there is a risk, there are procedures, aren't there? There's a procedures document which would have been helpful. We've only got the framework here. I've got questions about the risk register and how is that updated and how is that made available as a live document to managers and people who need it? I've got a number of questions that I'm not sure, are they appropriate for this?
So what I've tried to do here is to give an update on our risk position. So that relates back to the risk procedure and register that was presented to you early in the year. And in the audit and governance plan is I think it's next March, is a full review of where we are in risk. So this is by way of an update. And that's why I chose not to put all of the documents in on this occasion.
So next meeting we'll have the opportunity to talk about updating and access.
I'm very happy to come along with anything that the committee wishes to talk about in relation to risk, but we do look to have an annual review and then some and regular updates to the committee.
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Richard, before he moves on to the two items that we asked them to have a deeper dive into earlier in the year? Richard, do you want to put your slides?
Well, I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that this will come on. Yeah, yes. There we go, as if by magic. The wonders of technology. So, just by way of background, at your meeting in March, this was prior to my arrival in the organisation, you wanted to have some further, and that's when the risk register and risk procedure papers were also presented. So when you were reviewing the risk register, you asked that we go away and come back with the progress that we'd made against a couple of risks and how we were going to mitigate two risks that you particularly highlighted at that meeting. Those two risks were, as it says here, the inflation risk, and I'll come to that in a moment, and also the culture risk, so the risk that we're not able to create a single organisational culture in a new organisation. And I'm pleased to report to the committee that since you had that initial discussion in March, we've made a terrific amount of progress, particularly on the culture risk. In some ways, there's not a huge amount we can do on the inflation risk, but I'll come to that in a second. So just moving on, apologies if this is not brilliantly... I thought because these were massive screens, I remembered it from last time. This would be, so I did do a fairly small font here, but I will talk it through. So the reminder is, so EMCCA gets what was called an investment fund every year. We get 38 million, and that was part of our original devolution deal. It's only one part of our income, but it's a kind of, it's for the next 30 years. So. And that split 19 million revenue and 19 million capital. The rub is, unfortunately, that is a fixed amount each year, so is not indexed. So it follows that the value of that investment fund will be falling in real terms. So as we add inflation onto the expenditure side, we give pay awards to our staff, etc., things get more expensive. We're all acutely aware of, that real value of the investment fund will fall over time. And so in the risk register, that's assessed as a very likely risk, scored 4, and with a major impact if we don't reflect it, because it reflects a real terms fall in our purchasing or spending power as an authority. So we built that into the budget and medium-term financial plan. We make no reflections of indexation, and indeed we've had no indications from government that there will be any indexation on those sums. The saving grace, and this is not through any active management, it's just how our funding cocktail is working, is that the value of that investment fund is, however, falling and projected to continue to fall as a percentage of EMCCA's funding. So when we publish the budget, the draft budget for 26-27, it will show that the investment fund is only 12% of our revenue, is only 9% of our revenue income, and compared to this year when it's 12%. So you can see that whilst the spending power of it is falling, its actual contribution to our overall spending power is actually falling. The capital position is slightly different. It's constant around 8% between 25-26 and 26-27, but it will fall in future years as we've profiled the capital programme over 4 or 5 years. So what are we doing to mitigate the risk? So we've already pointed, we'd already, in the risk register, identified that we would be lobbying government, but we're getting, as I say, no indication that that will change. But the key is then developing new sources of finance to reduce the overall contribution of that investment fund to our overall funding. And you can see in points 1 to 4 below that we're making a lot of progress in that, and you can see by the percentages I've just quoted. The other thing that's really important is that as a strategic regional authority, one of the things that we are working towards is what has been awarded, first of all, to Greater Manchester and also to the West Midlands, long-established strategic authorities, and also is in train for a number of other more long-standing authorities like West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire, is what is called an integrated settlement. And what that means is rather than getting that 19 million every year and then a bunch of other specific grants from Department for Education for Skills, get another grant here for highways from the Department of Transport and the public transport grants, it's all integrated into one settlement, a bit like you'd be used to in your local authorities. Now we're on that journey. We have to be accredited as a established organisation, and we're in the process of doing that. One of the things that is a precursor to that is to agree our single assurance framework. That's been approved by government. So we're on a good trajectory towards integrated settlement, and that will be ultimately the mitigation of this risk, because our funding profile will change as a consequence of that. And so, as you can imagine, myself and colleagues are spending quite a bit of time on those endeavours and moving towards that position. Stop there. That's the inflation risk.
Any questions on Councillor Whitby?
Thank you. Yeah, it's just a comment on the example that we're given as a 2% inflation, which is the Bank of England's target rate, but we've been well above that for most of the 2020s. Do we not think it might be a bit more prudent? It's a little bit optimistic, if anything.
Indeed.
So do you think it'd be a bit more prudent to increase that at the moment and then review it in the future? Just so the figures that we're quoting in the mitigation sections, or sorry, in the impact sections, better reflect the realities.
So no, you're absolutely right. I mean, and of course, if you did apply, let's say, the current rate of inflation, which I believe is around 4, if you applied that and you just apply that through the formula, what you'd see is a much more rapid reduction in the real term spending power. Although we are told by analysts and the Bank of England that inflation will come back to its target within the next year or 18 months.
Just to come back, I agree. I think that's, but it has stalled over August and September. It's stuck at 3.8. But I just thought it might help the case in lobbying government if we can show a more drastic impact of what this means to us.
Good point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitby. Any other questions on the inflation risk part of the presentation? Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Edwards.
A bit philosophical, really, but I mean, in what way is this a risk rather than an issue?
Point.
Philosophically, perhaps I would agree with you.
I wanted to make a similar point that it didn't seem to me, wasn't there something more probable than probable, because it's definitely going to happen, almost definitely.
Yeah, I think so, and I mean, what I would say though, in defence of what was presented to the committee in March, that lobbying hadn't really then commenced at that point. We've had a number of conversations with the department, and the indications are that is not going to change. But we've done that in the context of other lobbying we're doing around things like integrated settlement and other funding flexibility. So it probably was more of a risk at that time, and now that we're probably pretty sure that it's going to be the case, we've certainly baked this assumption into the budget that it will be flat, what is called flat cash, i.e. not indexed.
Any other questions on the inflation risk part? Okay. you, Richard. Do you want to move on to the
I'm going to move on to the culture risk. So this is the risk, and this is from the register, that the transfer established cultures in various entities. So we're bringing together the LEP, we've got the transport function, we've got staff who have seconded from or have joined us from local authorities, we've got staff joining us from the private sector as well, other parts of the public sector. And the risk is that might create a set of distinct subcultures rather than a unified culture within the organisation. So you have different working practices, so people do what they're used to doing rather than how we would like them to work. That it and emphasises those individual silos versus the corporate. And whilst this scoring is a bit lower than the inflation risk as possible, the impact is major if we just allow it to drift and we don't really get on top of this. And certainly since I joined the organisation and we got a permanent management team in place with Amy as chief executive and other colleagues, executive director colleagues, it's been a really top priority of ours, which I'll illustrate in a minute, to really address this risk as we develop the organisation. So that's why I've said there that addressing and mitigating this risk is a leadership and organisational priority. So what are the mitigations? Clearly it's around making sure that we do the right things around organisational development and culture development and reinforcing behaviours. It's certainly about how we lead the organisation, but also how for things like performance management objectives, are set for people, what we expect for people when we set their objectives as members of staff. And then obviously continue to engage with people, have colleague away days and so on. So I've set out 12 things. I think genuinely we're really proud of where we've got to already in mitigating this risk. 12 actions that we've undertaken. So first of all, our values are embedded into our recruitment processes. So whenever we interview candidates for roles within EMCCA, we have a set of what we might call technical questions that we ask candidates linked to the role. But we also ask them questions linked to values. You know, how well and how can you demonstrate that you've collaborated with colleagues, etc., etc. So that's built into our recruitment process. So we're getting the right people into the organisation. The EMCCA Exchange is our performance management system. That is now implemented for all new joiners with an expectation that those objectives will be set. We did an engagement survey early in the year, and we're seeking ongoing staff feedback through, for example, the all-colleague days that we host. The last colleague away day was in October, and that had two themes. The first of all was what we call the EMCCA Marketplace, and that was all about all of those teams that have joined us and have come from different places, actually seeing what other teams are doing. So everyone had effectively set out their stall, and hence the market stall, set out their stall in terms of what those teams, and it enabled colleagues then to spend some considerable time getting to know what other teams in the organisation do. And the other focus was on that one team theme. We've actually scheduled future all-colleague days right the way through 2026 as well. We've got a permanent leadership team now in place, which we didn't have in March. So permanent directors have been appointed at the executive level, but we're also now appointing directors that are running the various services. Nick is an example of a permanent director of finance who we've hired and brought into the organisation very recently. Our leadership team is undergoing leadership development. We're investing in that, and we're also investing in our emerging talents, so people that we've identified as being capable of developing their careers within, at a more rapid pace within the organisation, and we're running a leadership programme for those individuals jointly with Trent University. We've got something called the Shaping EMCCA programme, which I'm sponsoring, which is all around how we build the right organisation design, the structures, the right resources, the right skills and so on for the organisation. And part of that is our what we call the path to permanence. So we are reducing our reliance on interim and temporary resources and building that culture that, we're all, permanent members of staff. Got some really good local and regional recruitment stats. So nearly 70% of our permanent employees live in the region, and over 40% have a travel to work or a commute of less than 30 minutes from our Chesterfield base. And we're working very hard, because this is part of what was identified in Mark, because we know we've got transport operational, public transport coming to EMCCA from the 4 constituent public transport authorities. So that's a really big programme of work that we're undertaking. We're bringing over 70 odd staff into the organisation next year, and taking responsibility for gross spend on public transport of 85 million across the region. So there's a huge programme of work in place. And then, as I reported to the EMCCA board last time, we have now an accommodation strategy in place, which basically says we will not seek a permanent HQ until we understand what the public estate might look like post local government reorganisation. But we are looking for dedicated, what we call mid-term accommodation in Chesterfield, and that will be announced imminently. And that will then, in next year, we will look to move into our dedicated space with lots more collaboration space than the accommodation we currently have, which is shared with a number of other organisations, which frankly we've outgrown. Stop there, because hopefully that gives the committee some assurance that we've identified this as a top risk, and we're on it, as they say.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Richard, for that. Can we just delve a little deeper into the culture risk around the 2Ping of the transport staff? There's a lot of people that are about to join EMCCA. That's a huge thing. They'll all come from different cultures that are built within the existing constituency authorities. So could you just elaborate a little more on that? I know from conversations I've had with Nottinghamshire County Council staff in the Transport Department, they're excited about that, but it's a big culture shift for them as well. So it's not just about EMCCA's culture, it's about the culture they're coming from. So if you could just elaborate on that, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, so as you would expect, in an endeavour of that size, we've got a significant programme that covers everything from the accommodation to the systems to the contracts. But we have got a dedicated people work stream in that transport programme that is both engaged informally with all of the teams that are affected. It's about 70 people across the 4 councils. So we've been engaging from day one of the programme with those people in terms of what to expect, and we're now moving into a formal consultation, which is a kind of a legislative requirement ahead of any TUPE transfer. So that is happening as we speak. In terms of how we bring those people into EMCCA, and then what we do post their transfer, what we're absolutely focused on, and I know those teams are, is that we have continuity of service. Because the bottom line is we've got to continue to provide a public transport service, make sure that the buses still run, and so on and so forth. So we're taking very much an approach where we're bringing those people into the organisation, and they will largely be using the same kind of systems and protocols that they've currently been using for a period of time. And then next year we'll embark on a further programme of bringing those both cultures together, and also bringing those systems and processes together as well, and looking for clearly from efficiencies from bringing 4 into 1. I mean, it is a big change for people, because at the end of the day we're asking people who perhaps have focused just, let's say, on transport in Derby. We'll have to think about transport on a very much bigger stage, which I think is really exciting for people. But it does come with changes. So there will be changes in a longer term in terms of where people work and how they work and what systems they use. But to make sure that we have a smooth transition, we're going to try and do that as carefully as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Patel, did you want to come in?
Thank you so much. I just want to know that what training or guidance is provided to staff members, you know, especially on how to manage risks, and how do you promote a culture where staff feel able to raise and discuss risks openly within the organisation?
Okay.
Thank you.
So I think for me, I think some of that tone has to be set by the leadership of the organisation. And first of all, we are investing time in ourselves. So when I talk about the leadership, I talk about what we call the executive leadership, myself, Amy, and the executive directors. And we're making some investment, modest investment, in developing how we work as a team and the tone we want to set and the values that we want to embed. Because at the end of the day, there's no substitute for actually being able to set a tone as a leader in an organisation. What we're now doing, again on that same theme of leadership development, is we're now actively promoting how we work through the extended management team. So those are the people that report directly to us, people like Nick. Now, we've only just got a relatively full cadre of permanent directors in place. So there's still early days on there, but we want to make sure that the tone that we set is then cascaded to the tone that Nick and his colleagues then set with their teams. At the same time, we do have access to training development. We've got a dedicated permanent training and development lead, access to lots and lots of formal and informal training materials. There's lots of things we ask people to do. There's mandatory training in things like information governance, because clearly that's a big risk, you know, in terms of data security and so on. So there's a whole bunch of things that we're doing to obviously both set the tone for the culture of the organisation, but also giving people the practical tools. Everyone, for example, has a full induction programme as they join the organisation, which we've again invested heavily in, which is also heavily emphasises the values of the organisation.
Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, I have a few concerns about what's being said. First of all, the emphasis on where people work. I mean, the world's changed already. If you knew what Loxley House used to look like and what it looks like now in terms of the number of people actually in there,
yeah.
Huge amount of homework working going on. Yeah. So this idea of where people are actually located, it seems to me already a tad old-fashioned, but definitely a culture problem for me. It's not so much that sense of whether you've got unity, but whether you've got a focus on being good at process rather than actual focus on delivering an achievement. And my example on that would be the status of the integrated transport plan, which happened to be substitute to the Transport Committee a couple of weeks ago. And again, it reads like a textbook. We're 18 months in, and that sense of, right, what is it we want to get on and really do? You might say, well, it's got to go through a consultation process. Okay, but you'd expect a few ideas in there. And I do worry that there is a focus here on, oh, we'll make sure we're doing it by the textbook and getting the process right, and not a focus on what difference are you making. And it is a problem, I think, that EMCCA's going to have to speed up a little bit on, because I just don't think it's done enough of that sense of what is it wants to get done. And it is a bit tricky in transport, because however much you might think it's strategy and operational, we've got this model, haven't we, of local government review, and EMCCA is going to be strategic, and what comes after it is operational. But there's a good deal of the bit that I go and see our strategic transport officers about. It's quite a bit operational, actually. Quite a hard demarcation line to draw hard and fast. Yeah. So watch out for that one as well. For me, the culture issue, I mean, the other culture issue is this issue of saying, right, try and make all four the same. I'm sorry, I'm talking in code there. 2 cities and 2 counties making the same. You're talking about Nottingham City, which is an exemplar in terms of delivering integrated transport strategy. We're regarded as the best in the country. And I've already heard it in some places, oh, we've got to make us all the same. Excuse me, we've got to hang on to the stuff that really delivers and really succeeds and not lose that. And a good deal of that is, yeah, the fact we've had the vision for the strategy, but it's also there's a good deal of focus on the operation. And so it's tricky, right? So what am I really saying? I think I'd like you to reflect upon to what extent you've become process orientated rather than actually what are you going to deliver? Have you got it listed? Have you got it set out in a way that it sparks the imagination? Makes people think, oh, I want to be a part of that. So that would be that first point. Second thing would be the undue emphasis on making sure people are all working in the same place. Not least given what home working is like. And then the obvious flaws in any kind of model that says that's strategic and that's operational. It's never that clear cut. Yeah. Granted, you're being given that model, so there's no point in me trying to say change the model. I am trying to say to you, understand that that's one of the risks you've got to deal with. But somewhere on the line, there's going to be a bit of a step change now in terms of where we're going, in terms of actually getting something done. And I don't mean that as a criticism of the politics of it necessarily. I just think everybody's sort of saying, oh, well, we've got to do is make sure it's steady state, steady ship. And just understand that at Nottingham, the agenda on transport is actual delivery. And to counter that, actually, counter my own argument, I would say in my own ward, I've already noticed the step change that we're now getting on with things. And again, I don't know if it's strategic or operational, but I've got a new bus stop. We're doing a new bus lane. We've got a new vision for how we're going to create a network of recognised cycling and wheeling walks within the ward. Stuff that I think wouldn't have been happening if I hadn't got the backup of EMCCA the way we've got it. So, I mean, I think there is a sense that sometimes maybe it's the way you're presenting it. But the very bulk of what you've got and the money that you have got and the assurance that that's given has enabled change. But it's not coming across in the way you're writing anything. The way you're writing anything comes across as, well, this is what we do next in the textbook. So a bit of a few contradictory remarks there, but the gist of it is there are flaws in the model, whatever we end up in terms of reorganisation. Don't try and therefore make the focus making the model work. Make the focus being make the thing work for the people. And I'm sure that's where you are anyway. I wouldn't want to imply you don't care about the customers. I think that would be rude and unacceptable. So I won't say that. But what I am saying is think a little bit harder about what we're doing in terms of a culture that says achievements and targets rather than process.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Plenty of things for you to take back
Yes,
to your colleagues. Councillor Ridbred and me? Yeah, okay, thank you. Jumping on, following here from Councillor Edwards as well, is fear of a monoculture, which granted we all need to be pulling in the same direction. We have got to get somewhere, but by doing that, it's important that we don't stifle the best of Nottingham City transport. If they have got the best model, it's important that we use this diversity. It's a word that gets thrown around a lot, but we need to use this diversity to get the best out of each of these pockets. And granted, the best over there might not work the best over here in Derby. It might be apples and oranges, but we need to make sure that we're not just, we do it this way, diktat, because that is something that I would hate for EMCCA to become, a dictatorial, this is how we do it, the whole East Midlands do it our way. Well, that's not always the best way. You need that little bit of diversity, and to be picking from a talent pool as wide as we've got up here, and then saying, but you all have to do it our way, it seems counterintuitive to me, and I'm very pleased, because it seems an automatic counter to that, in the investment in leadership, because it's down to leaders from the very tippity top to down at the lower levels to see, oh, I've not seen the way that this organisation does things. This is fantastic. This is working. Let's make sure we can feed that up the chain. So I'm very pleased to hear that that's one of the strategies, or several of them actually, of the 12 points you've made, to get that leadership to a standard that perhaps they can, yes, the monoculture, we are going this direction, but let's not be blinkered. Let's take the best that we can see. So I say, on a simple point, let's not get too narrowed down. And I say it's about the results, not getting what we want
organisation. It's about getting what we want to do done. I've made myself clear with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright.
Yes. Picking up on the points raised by Councillor Edwards and Councillor Whitbread, what review framework do you have in mind for the desirable cultural cohesion that you are wanting to deploy?
So part of that, Councillor Wright, is embedded within, I mentioned the EMCCA exchange, which is the method by which we set objectives and assess performance and staff performance against those objectives. And we've taken a view in that EMCCA exchange, in designing that you know, clearly we have to, you know, make sure that we are addressing hygiene factors within that, you know, things like people's productivity and people's performance, of course, but there's a big emphasis within that EMCCA exchange about how our staff are living our values. And I should say, just in response to both Councillor Edwards and sorry, I'm getting my Councillor Whitbread as well, that is not about a monoculture. It's not about saying, look, there's only one way of doing it. What we're saying is clearly we have a set of values that we want to role model as leaders, but also that we want our staff to embrace, and that's why they're part of that. But one of those things that we want to encourage is innovation, and we want to take and encourage the best of breed. And where we see great practice, you know, clearly we'll be looking to embed that across the organisation, rather than, as you said, to create a monoculture.
Just to come back, what I really wanted to make a philosophical point when we're talking about culture, oh dear, we're talking about obviously things that are, it's organic.
It is, yeah.
And we need to be mindful of that, and it's not just about a static situation. This is what the textbook says. So reviewing periodically what you're doing and perhaps moving away from the benchmark in the textbook, which may not be relevant.
No,
I think we need to be mindful of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. And can I just also point out, I've just noticed that Councillor Wright is from Derby City Council and not Buckinghamshire County Council.
Not yet. I was going to say the reorganisation hasn't happened yet, and I haven't moved across yet.
So thank you. Councillor Lucas, did you want to come in?
Yes, please. Thank you. Really, mine follows on from what's been said by my three colleagues here. With regards to the leadership training, it's great that you've got that in place and you've got plans for that. I also, you've mentioned your values, EMCCA values, and what I wanted to know was, is that going to be like, is that going to be supported by like a standard set of competency frameworks and behaviours? And is that going to be transparent? So will there be competencies for leaders and then competence expected of all staff within those values? In addition, I'm quite interested to know, in terms of the leadership training, is it going to be what I would call sheep dip? So are we going to send all our leaders onto a wonderful course and then that's it, they've been trained? Because basically, I speak from experience, that won't work, and you need to have continuous support mechanisms in place, and this links into culture. So you need things like having psychological safety. How do you create psychological safety in the workplace? How do you lead people through change? How do you have difficult conversations? Are we just leaving it to the once a year or every 6 month performance review? Because that shouldn't be the case. There should be no surprises to anybody in a performance review. So I think it's that whole support infrastructure that's really important, and I'd be interested to know what consideration you've taken to ensure that support infrastructure is in place for leadership and for staff.
So there's quite a lot to unpack there. I mean, I think the point about competencies and values is that both of those things are embedded within our recruitment processes. So clearly, as we move from a and we mature as an organisation. As I've said, we want, obviously a permanent workforce. We want to move away from interims. Made huge strides there, so we're down to less than a third at the moment. So, in terms of then how we recruit people, we first of all make sure that the selection criteria for bringing people into interview are based on competencies, and that we write the job descriptions in that way. As I say, when we do the interviewing at all levels, but obviously the more senior you get, the more involved it becomes, we do make sure that we're testing those competencies, what we expect of the role, but also secondly, how those roles are delivering on our values. We also want to make these roles really exciting for people. We want people to positively want to join the organisation. So we try and be, as considerate to the candidate experience as we are to the employer experience when we recruit. Absolutely not on sheep. I absolutely don't agree with just, that leadership development is a tick box. It's something that we need to evolve over time. And actually, it's not just something you do on an away day, although away days are quite important, but it's actually how you model and value those behaviours all the time. And so that's why we're making that investment, not just in our kind of top leadership, but also in our extended management team. I mentioned the EMCCA exchange as our performance management process. That is not, and is deliberately designed not to be a kind of half year or each year thing, but one around a constant feedback loop and expectation that line managers and their staff are constantly feeding back. And absolutely, we want to create that psychological safety in that relationship between the line manager and the member of staff. Not least in the fact that we're trying to make this a constructive exercise to help people develop their careers, rather than something that is a kind of hard. This is how you are performing against your colleague, because that kind of does create a kind of a slightly different dynamic than a place where the line manager and their staff can actually have an open exchange with one another.
Thank you for that. I think for me, it's just the consideration in terms of how do you measure behaviour, and it's all very well, and it links into, I think it's Councillor Edwards, what he said here about having a very textbook kind of approach, because we can send people on training, so it's easy to tick the knowledge box. We can say that they've got the skill because they've had the training, but how it's about considering how we measure attitude, and making sure that we do nip that in the bud if the attitude isn't right and doesn't fit your values and your culture.
Yeah, so a couple of points there to come back on. So how do we measure? I mean, obviously we're still at a relatively early stage as an organisation, but we mentioned the staff survey that was undertaken earlier this year. We've taken the results of that really, really seriously. So we've taken some lessons in terms of, for example, leadership visibility and how people want to see us as leaders in the organisation. So we've taken some of that feedback. We know we've got picking up the process is something that people are saying to us, actually, it still feels a bit clunky, even though you're a quite young organisation. We need to try and think about how we use technology and other things to streamline our processes, to make the working life a bit easier for people. So I think there's a number of ways in which we're taking that and measuring that behaviours. We've now just introduced a new HR management information system that gives us the opportunity to take spot surveys on things, and we always take the staff feedback after each away day, after each event, so that we're constantly learning how to improve the next event.
One last point, sorry, and then I'll shut up. Just really for reflection, and again, this is something that in my outside of council hat I've had a request for, and that is the consideration of training your leaders in terms of how to remote manage and hybrid manage. because I think since, I think it was Councillor Edwards said, the world's changed, and we do have hybrid and remote working, and there's very little leadership training around how you manage those relationships, and it's a completely different dynamic. So it's just more for reflection than anything else.
Yes, it is a very good point. Because I mean, it's not going to go away, is it? It's with us. It is with us now. Hybrid working, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you, Lucas. Councillor Lucas. Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, Shell, I'm going to need your help on the next bit. It's been a funny time the last couple of weeks, but the gist of it is we had some kind of assessment of our risk policies in March. A table was published of about 10 observations that we wanted to pick up and were going to be dealt with. And then that table was published when we had our meeting in Rushcliffe in the minutes. And they said, yeah, we'll fill all those blanks in for the next meeting. And I'm now, please correct me if I've got this wrong, but what's happened to filling the blanks in on that table on what we thought we needed to pick up on risk?
So some of those items we picked up on the action plan, and Michael's updated the action plan. I think we...
it's in there, is it?
In there. So
how do I see it's in there? Do forgive me.
It's in the agenda.
It's in the agenda as a last item.
Last item?
It's the last item.
Why didn't you stop me?
So but when we get to that, if there are any other items that we probably, if you recall, that we probably haven't covered, and again, we have to bear, because Richard wasn't at that meeting, so he's tried his best to try and pick up and understand what was raised. And plug those gaps. But let's wait till the action plan and then come back and... thank you, Councillor Edwards. And cut and slice it now. Sorry, moving on.
Probably not.
If we have...
cost you millions,
no. So, thank you, Richard. The recommendations we've been asked are to note the risk management update, including the two risks, inflation and culture, that the committee wishes to consider further. Note the implementation risk management framework and the next steps. And item C were the risks which were considered as part of the MTFP and the budget for next year. Can we accept them? Yeah. Thank you. So we've now been asked to swap items 10 and 11. So we're now going to consider item 11, which is the governance update. Item 11, which is on page 73 of your papers. Can I invite Catherine to introduce that item?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for, it just seemed to make more sense to me to do this way around, to present the updates to the Constitution that we're proposing to take to board in item 11, and then discuss the sort of further work that might be needed on the Constitution. So the recommendation we're seeking is that you note and support the amendments to the Constitution that we're going to be presenting to EMCCA board on the 24th. The Constitution of EMCCA should be seen as a living, breathing item document. It's not simply a set of rules that we leave in a cupboard somewhere, apply as a textbook without linking it to delivery. That's really important, that as we move through, mature as an organisation, we develop effective and efficient ways of working that are reflected in our delegation schemes, our Officer Code of Conduct, which you dealt with last time, and all the detailed work that we need to do to make sure that our Constitution effectively supports the work and delivery of EMCCA as an organisation, whilst holding the risks and the measures that we need to have in place firmly, so that we do have a clear, transparent and effective way of frameworking the delivery that we need to see in the region. So the report that you have in front of you is the text of a report which is going to the board, but there have been some updates and changes to the report that's going to board, so I would like just to highlight some of those as we go through. So just to look through item 2, you've got an executive summary which details the kind of issues that we're talking about. One of the key changes for the forthcoming period is that the Mayor will be stepping back from committees, not all committees, but some. She was until now a member of each of the committees, but in June, the board gave further power and authority to the committees to be able to be decision-making boards, committees rather than simply having powers to see documentation, see policy, and then approve it onto board. So committees are taking a more significant role in decision-making, and the board is sitting as a more strategic player in how EMCCA is delivering across the region. With that in mind, and the powers that the committee have to take those steps, the Mayor is realigning her position in terms of the board role. She will still remain in some committees, Transport Committee primarily, because that obviously is a really key mover for the region at this point. And that has constitutional implications. So we need to change the terms of reference for the committees to take her out of the voting membership of those committees, so she's not simply sending apologies to every meeting. And the public participation within those meetings, which currently allows members of the public to ask questions of the Mayor, obviously and sensibly isn't going to be able to reply if she's not at those committees. So to make sense of that, we've proposed some changes to the terms of reference and the public participation across the piece. And there are minor and consequential amendments, therefore. So what does that mean for choracy? And we've updated those documents and we'll be sharing those with the board. So the other item that we're including in that is we're also asking for authority to seal with an electronic seal. So that is, again, simply a matter of efficiency and moving into the 21st century proper and enabling us as a region that recognises we won't necessarily have people physically working in one place for that whole time to enable us to do that. So that's an addition to this report that you won't have seen within the report. It is going to be included in what's going to board. So I wanted to make you aware of that. Audit and Governance Committee approved the revised Officer Code of Conduct at its last meeting, and that is going forward. That forms part of the Constitution, and it's going forward to board with the recommendation that it is adopted with the amendments that committee recommended on the last occasion. One of the things that we need to also consider is the appropriate scheme of delegations to officers. So officers, obviously statutory officers, have statutory requirements in their roles, which are set out in the Constitution and referred to from the statute, but also there are local organisational issues within those. So, for example, we have made some amendments and proposals to the Section 73 officer, our Executive Director of Resources, and we've included those within the documentation that you've seen. One of the changes that is not in the report that you have seen, but will be going to board, is to allow the Executive Director to make awards of grant to constituent authorities and non-constituent members of EMCCA, so that that piece of delivery isn't held up by the need to go to board for a decision where it's very evident that the money and the funding that we are wanting to get out can go out through a delegated route. So that is some of the amendments that you haven't seen directly in these papers. I will ask shortly for Richard to deal with the detail of the schedule of delegations that has changed in terms of the finance regulations, because those are some of the key parts of the changes to the scheme of delegations. There are then, we are looking at, in the next item, I'll obviously touch on this more, we're then looking at how, in terms of keeping a live review of the Constitution a year on and moving into 2 years old, as we will be next year as EMCCA, what we need to do further and broader to make sure we streamline our working and to make sure we operate in a way which is effective in a world where we are obviously looking at local government reform as well, alongside it, to make sure that we have a constitution which enables us to do the delivery in the way that we would like to do that. So before I ask for the recommendation, I will hand over to Richard to just talk to you about what in the scheme of delegations has changed as far as the budgetary setting is concerned. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah. Am I on? No, I've got to put myself on. Right, so that everyone can hear me. So in terms of the scheme of delegation, we are making no fundamental changes to the scheme. What we're doing is making sure that it has the right coverage and is comprehensive enough to deal with some of the matters that we've now found we need to deal with on an operational basis, and not to hold up delivery based on the experience of the first period of EMCCA's existence. What I would say in terms of a scheme of delegation is, at the end of the day, it is the role of the EMCCA board and elected members to set the budget, both the capital budget and the revenue budget, for the authority, and to agree what monies are held in reserve, particularly those held in reserve for specific purposes. So that is the role of members. So none of this is to in any way diminish that overriding role of members to approve the budget. But once the budget is approved, what we're asking is just for some additional flexibilities in relation to how we approve expenditure that's already within the approved budget. So that is actually set out in the table. It's reflecting two things. First of all, to make sure that there is a recognition that when we do stuff, it can be funded from the revenue budget, but it may also require funding from an earmarked reserve. And what we're having to do at the moment is, whenever we want to draw something from an earmarked reserve, we have to come to board. So we're just suggesting that, or proposing that, where an earmarked reserve is involved, it is treated as part of the approved budget. And of course, it is approved at the budget setting session. The second thing is to reflect the fact that we're maturing as an organisation, and we actually have a more permanent management structure. So what this is also suggesting, again within budget, that I'm able to delegate some of that decision making to Nick and to other directors in the organisation, in consultation with either myself or with Nick. So that's on the budget side of things. We are making no proposals to change the scheme of delegation in relation to expenditure outside budget. So of course, when from time to time there will be the need to authorise expenditure that's not formally approved in the budget. It's kind of my task to find a way of funding it. But then that does need that democratic approval because it's not in the budget. So we're making no changes there. We're tidying up the award of contract to make it consistent with the approval of in-budget spend, but no more than tidying up on award of contract. And we're also introducing a section that wasn't in the scheme of delegation originally, but needs to be, which is around budget environment. So where, even within the overall context of an approved budget, we're able to sensibly move monies within and budget provision within directorates, and also monies between directorates if we need to, and to and from earmarked reserve. So that's the kind of whole budget environment process. Again, that is kind of fairly tightly controlled in terms of financial limits, both that need to come to me, that we need to consult the mayor on, for example, and then what we can delegate to other officers. The final thing that I would say is that the overall spirit of this is still around transparency, and of course those key decisions that we make that affect these things, whether we're awarding a contract or whatever, that comes back to through the democratic process, through the transparency report that comes to every EMCCA board. So officers are not making decisions behind closed doors without that full transparency of reporting to elected members, but at the same time giving officers the flexibility and the agility to work at pace between boards.
Thank you, Richard. So there's two parts to it. There's obviously what Catherine said earlier, then the mainly financial budget delegation. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Just on Catherine's governance update, I don't know, you may have already done this, so forgive me, and there may be some technicalities about decision-making committees not being able to do it, etc. But we've heard a lot about the ever-changing world that we work in now, and we've travelled from Nottingham and other parts of Derby to come here. Is there any work being done on virtual meetings, hybrid meetings for committees, and how we can implement that? I know East Midlands Councils, I sit on that, for Nottinghamshire County Council, they've just taken a step into virtual and hybrid meetings as well. It will reduce the expense cost, I'm sure, so just clarification on where we're at with that, please.
Catherine, do you want
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, we had to have the law change before that could be formally contemplated by any authority to see whether remote meetings were applicable and appropriate. I think there certainly, when this was mooted, there were widespread feelings that actually in-person meetings had significant benefits. So it wouldn't be a question of simply making a decision about, are we doing one or the other? But it may well be one of the areas of work that this and the Overview and Scrutiny Committee could consider as to whether or not there is scope for EMCCA to do that. But there is a significant feeling, certainly when this has been discussed before, that in-person meetings are actually really helpful. It's the only place where a number of you get together to see each other, to talk about how your authorities work. And an online meeting, the feedback about those were that they can be quite perfunctory. You can get the business done, but you can't necessarily get all the other elements of the interactions that we need to be a truly combined authority. So we haven't put that as a proposal forward. I know that Richard will no doubt take those comments back to the senior leadership team, and if any further business is required in terms of taking that under a survey and so on, that'll be something I think the senior leadership team need to have significant input into. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Catherine. Any other comments or observations from members? No? Okay, so in which case we've been asked to note and support the amendments to the Constitution, which will be presented to the EMCCA board on the 24th of November. So we move back to item 10, which is the establishment of a working group to review the Constitution. So Catherine touched on that, and Catherine, do you want to just add to that item?
Yes, thank you. Again, you're being invited to consider 3 recommendations, which is the approval of the establishment of a working group to assist the Director of Legal Governance and Compliance and the Monitoring Officer with the review of the EMCCA Constitution. As I said at the beginning of the last item, it should rightly be a living document, not something that sits away from the everyday working of the authority. We would invite today for consideration of how that working group might be constituted, if you are happy to proceed with that as a positive proposal. And we are also proposing a set of terms of reference. Now, again, the one in the pack that you've had, I'm not sure what the electronic heckling is that I'm getting there, but I apologise for it. I don't think it's in my control. So the terms of reference of the working group that's in the pack, we did raise with the Chair and Vice Chair, Councillor Wright, in the briefing meeting this week, that it might be more appropriate to seek a working group of a smaller number of councillor members than is set out in the current terms of reference. We've also put a time limit in a new terms of reference. We can circulate that terms of reference that we've redrawn with those included, but that was it's again, as a living document, it's something that we've dealt with this week, and we wanted to make sure that you were aware of what was being proposed. So it's as is in your pack, aside from a smaller number of members on that working group and a time limit. So it should be over the next year to take something to board in the autumn of next year. So that's the change there. And then we'd also like to invite you, if you consider that a working group is the right way forward with that terms of reference, to consider nominating a chair for that working group. And Chair, if I may say that Charles has said that he would offer to chair that working group if the committee felt that that was appropriate, but obviously wanted to bring it here today for your discussion and recommendations. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Catherine. So, I mean, initially, do we think it's a good idea to have a working group and to assist the governance team and the monitoring officer in terms of the review of the Constitution? And then we can discuss further if we, the membership of that group and the chair. Councillor Morgan McGean.
Thanks, Chair. And again, it's my turn to say, forgive me if I've missed some context and pre-context to this, but I'm unclear on a number of aspects. So if it's okay with you, I'm just going to scattergun it. And I'm sure if it's not already been answered by what you've said this morning, because my notes slightly predate your update, that you'll be able to answer them quickly. But I'm not entirely clear on where the need and the requirement for the group has originated. So if there's a request that's coming from the monitor officer and associated officers, then I get that, but I'm just not clear on how that's happened. Second of all, is this going to be the only advisory group of this nature on this document? Because what I don't want to do is have duplicated working groups across multiple committees. For example, if the scrutiny committee are also looking at this kind of thing. So I think that's important to get that central view of whether this is the only group or whether we probably should be forming part of a wider group. So that's that point. Also, you have answered this, by the way. I did wonder whether this was just a one-off hit to get it up and running and then we hand the keys back. But from the sounds of it, with this being a living document, perhaps it's a committee that ought to survive beyond the initial setup to consider reviews on an ongoing basis. And I've written here, it says all members. You've all picked up on that already. If all the members are joining the group, then why have the group? Why not just have that as an agenda item on the Audit and Governance Committee to start with? And actually, that would remain my opinion anyway, because I don't necessarily see that we should have a separate group for something that this group can already take care of. It just adds layers and bureaucracy, in my opinion. I'm nearly there. So, does the group need its own leadership? You've answered that. Thank you. Moving on. Who does the actual work that the group discusses? Is there an officer resource sitting behind the group to support it and actually make the recommended changes to the document? And finally, I know it's for the board to approve, but if it's Audit and Governance approving the pre-approval approvals, that reinforces my opinion that actually it could be a function of Audit and Governance rather than a working group. That's it. I'll throw the mic out and leave somebody to reply.
I hope Catherine made a note of all those questions.
I think so. I've made a mental note. So in terms of where this has arisen from, our monitoring officer, certainly in terms of where we've been needing to do some tidying up around the Constitution because of the changes to the committee, we wanted to ensure that any such work in the future certainly has this group's approval. So one of the ways to do that is a working group so that can be flexible and effective outside of a committee cycle. I have to say, if this committee feels that it could be an item on the audit committee, that is something that we'll absolutely support and work with in the same way as if it was a working group. So it is a genuine, would this be a useful thing for us to do? We think that it could have use and flexibility, but in terms of making it a standing item and perhaps convening informal discussions as needed, again, that's an option that the committee could consider. So I think I'd answered the majority of the other matters that you raised. The actual work of the group could, of course, be discussed and set within the group in its first meeting if that's the route that this committee would wish to follow. I am mindful that there has been a survey sent out by the monitoring officer, which I believe has been sent to all members to ask about any issues that they might like to raise in terms of the committee and board processes, as well as the Constitution in general, but also to talk about the value that this kind of thing can add. So that has gone out. I think we've had something like 6 responses so far. So if that has, oh, forgive me. So that's been internally shared, and it would be then shared with the wider membership to understand what in the Constitution is working or not working. So in terms of throwing this open, the trigger in lots of ways was the changes to the public participation, because the questions that come obviously forward are that those are changing because of the mayor's departure from committees, but they also could be streamlined. And again, if those are things that this committee would feel strongly about, it would be an opportunity to understand how that could be best taken forward. So again, I hope I've answered everything that you asked. If not, please do come back to me.
Yes, thank you. You have. Thank you.
Any other members before we discuss? Carry on, Councillor Edwards.
Southampton's Nottingham City Council has got a committee or a task group that actually does look at the Constitution in some detail, and to be honest, does it in a very thorough kind of way, and I would rather a working party like that existed for this rather than put it on the automatically assume all members of this committee would want to be on that. So I mean, I would support a working group rather than this being done at this committee, because of the kind of conversations that you get into when you're trying to sort out sentences that say this when perhaps they should say that. So, you know, thanks for the offer that it comes here, but I'd rather pass it on to a group who want to do it, really.
Any other thoughts? Councillor Whitbread.
Yeah, I did think it was odd when I first came to this as the Chair for Governance, Ethics and Standards at Derbyshire. There is an audit committee and a governance committee. We have 2 separate bodies. Now, I can think of plenty of reasons why you would want to put the 2 together, as we've done here. I'm interested in why from you in front of us, why the decision was made in this instance to make it a shared group, and now you're seeing the benefit perhaps of taking it apart. And I wonder if it's why the decision was made to amalgamate, and what potential is to pull it apart further. But I would also like to be very happy for you to chair this working group, and I'd love to sit on it as well. I'd put myself forward for that, but yeah, please.
Thank you. So, I mean, I think we're probably not taking away all the governance aspects of this audit committee. We're probably just creating the sort of small group for, if I understand, just the constitutional amendments for it to be looked in more kind of detail.
I think it works really well because I'm part of the Standards and Audit Governance Committee at Nottingham City Council, and we have working groups and we've reviewed our constitution, and sometimes the kind of conversations you have and the kind of input that you have to give, the reading that you need to do before coming to the meeting, I think it'll just take away, you know, what we actually want to do and achieve as an Audit and Governance Committee. And looking at the Constitution separately, having a small working group makes more sense. But I just want to know how many numbers would that be if you're looking at a small working group, because we don't have the numbers. And also, I don't know whether it's even in our terms of reference might be worth reviewing whether how we want to go forward with the Audit and Governance Committee if we want to amalgamate in the future. But yeah, that's it.
I can certainly confirm that in the revised terms of reference, we're proposing a working group of 3. Again, open to whether that's an appropriate number or whether you'd like to see that any differently, but that's what we, following advice from the Chair and Vice Chair earlier this week, that's what we have put in the revised terms of reference, which we, again, can circulate to you now if you would like to have that in writing in front of you as opposed to me. I'm grateful.
Councillor Staton.
Presumably anybody thinking of volunteering would want to know what the commitment was likely to be in terms of number of meetings and time.
So the proposal again is that we would meet 4 times as a working group between now and an end point of autumn next year. So it would hopefully not be too great a commitment. It would be in the gift of the working group itself if it wanted to revise that to take that forward.
And would that be hybrid or face-to-face?
They would be informal meetings, so they could take place on Teams.
Okay, so we have two schools of thought. Obviously, some members preferring a small working group, some members preferring the the whole of the Audit and Governance Committee to be as a standing item maybe on the agenda to look at any constitution changes. So probably in the interest of fairness, maybe if people...
Apologies, I've just recalled there was one further question, which is, would this be the only working group looking at this? And it would. There are no proposals that other committees do this work.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. So maybe Councillor McGee, I'll come back.
Well, thanks, Chair. It's just I feel I owe an explanation because it's going to appear odd in a minute when I support the working group. Following good advice from Nottinghamshire Council about the level of the depth of work involved, and on hearing that it's 3 dedicated members over 4 meetings, I actually think it's not a bad shout. But what I would say is, though, consider this not being a 1 year, and consider the longevity, and equally, the continuity of that, because if all 3 members drop out in 1 year, you'll be starting the work again every year. Yeah. So that's just food for thought, but please don't judge me too harshly now. I'm doing a U-turn. It's in receipt of good advice.
As long as you're there.
Thank you. So maybe it might be easier for me to ask that. Is anybody who is in favour of not having a working group? So I take it that we're all in favour, or majority are in favour of having a small working group. In which case, who would like to be a member of that working group? And if we have more than 3, we could always decide on the time in terms of availability and meetings. Any sort of volunteers as to who'd like to be on the working group? Councillor Whitbread, Councillor Wright.
I assume you as well.
And also, I was going to add that I've offered to be the chair, but again, I'm quite happy for anybody else to be the chair as well. So,
Chair, I think perhaps having 4 would give us the balance. I'm thinking about the balance in terms of councils. So the Nottingham, no. So Nottingham, where you and I'm City of Derby. So I think.
Did you say no, Councillor Edwards? Councillor Edwards said no, I think.
No, I was thinking of Councillor Patel, actually.
No, I didn't.
We're not trying to coerce anybody. It's an informal meeting, not trying to coerce anybody into it. So we have Councillor Whitbread, Councillor Wright, myself, and
Councillor
Patel. Councillor Lucas.
So you end up with 5. Is this okay? You want 5? I don't care. How many have you ended up with? 4. You're happy? Good. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. But obviously, when we have items arising or in terms of availability, if we have any issues, might even open it up again back to the membership to see if anybody else wants to join. Councillor, have we got everything we need from that?
I think so. So just to recap on the membership, Councillors Wright, Whitbread and Lucas, and Shell, you've agreed to be the chair.
Yeah.
And everybody's agreed on that. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. So move on to item 12, our forward work programme. Michael, do you want to introduce?
Yeah, this is our standing item, really just opportunity to look at the items coming up in future meetings and an action plan, finally. So in terms of future meetings, the next meeting is an informal one in January, and we have on the list at the moment a session on the procurement strategy as a briefing about how it worked, etc. There's also a suggestion, it's one of the actions that was on the list that we'll come to in a little bit, that you as members have a private meeting with the internal and external auditors. And my suggestion would be, but this is up to you entirely, that we do that on the 16th. As we're all getting, it'll be online, it's an online meeting.
So the meeting on the 16th, the informal meeting, I have to give my apologies, so I'm not there. But I'm quite happy for the procurement strategy to be informally, it's an informal meeting, there's no decision making to carry on. The meeting with the external and internal auditors, what I was going to suggest is that after our February meeting, we have a very short 10 minutes meeting with the internal and external auditors, since they're already here and we're all here, or wherever the venue is. So I was going to propose that we meet, so at least it's done before the end of this end of the financial year, and it gives the opportunity for internal and external auditors to raise anything with us in a private session, just with the members of this authority. So
that'll be the 27th of February.
Yeah. So if everybody's okay with that, then we can do that at the next meeting.
Thank you. And then going to the action plan. So clearly we're backtracking to the March meeting when there were a number of actions, but we've now, Richard has gone through these, and those that we understand, they have been resolved either by Richard or by or had already been done before his predecessor left. And then I am now including in that register the actions arising from these meetings going forwards. So if you recall, at the last meeting there was a number of suggestions on in terms of the code of conduct. They've all been addressed by the senior manager and included in the code of conduct, and this is just letting you know that action has been addressed. Some are partial just by the very nature of the action. So yeah, any questions on that and how that's, and if it's giving you the information you need to give you the confidence that actions are being taken account of.
Can I ask what P is?
P is partial, sorry, I should have said partial. Yeah. So every meeting, this will be a standing item, and I'll bring the action plans to the actions that we've agreed today. Will be on here.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for updating that. Any questions for Michael? Or
Would it be helpful to have the date of the ANG meeting? That's the meeting when this was an issue that was decided. Just a very minor point, but would it be helpful to have that at the left of the column rather than the other end?
Yes,
I don't know.
I can do that. Yeah, no
I'm sort
problem.
of thinking, where did this come from? And it's partly to do with the screen and the size and everything, but it's just a suggestion.
No problem.
yeah, maybe format that table. Any other observations or tips for Michael? What would make it useful for us for future meetings? In which case, thank you, Michael, for updating that and keeping a record, and holding the committee and officers to account on the actions. So that was the last item. So thank you, everyone, and have a safe journey back. Thank you.